Well, welcome back to another cold flippity-floppity day in St. Louis. I say flippity-floppity because it's been really warm, then really cold, then really warm, then really cold. So today I've decided to make a little short video on a situation that could possibly be a problem on the red bug today. I was driving the bug the other day and it has the... Here, let me show you. People with bugs know about this, and all cars have this. It's just in a different format. You got your oil light, and you got your generator light, aka alternator, on newer cars. And I was sitting at a light, and I drove it around for probably 15 minutes, and the generator light started flickering, which means, and on that bug, it means it's idling too low. So when I saw that and I'm sitting at a light, I was a little concerned because if it's idling low, that means there's a problem. Which is odd for this car because it's never done that. Usually once it's started up and then you get it going for a few minutes, it's fine. But it kept flickering, and then the lights were off, the headlights were off and everything. So I'm not really sure what was causing it. And so then I got home. And this problem pops up every once in a while, and maybe someone out there knows better than me what it could be. I got a light on. I don't have the best lighting in the world, but right now I got the engine off, haven't started it because it's a smidgen low on oil, and I don't have any right now. And that's one thing I noticed on these cars, you gotta have them topped up with oil. And I'm close enough to needing an oil change that I'm just going to wait. I'm not going to buy just like one quart. And I'll just buy both quarts or a quart, whatever it is, and just do an oil change. What I have noticed is that sometimes on the warmer days, and it's so inconsistent, it's one of the reasons I'm having a huge problem diagnosing this problem, is that right here, it leaks gas. It'll just drip. And I'm not sure where it's coming from or what the deal is, but even right now, I mean, there's there's gas coming out of here sometimes. It doesn't do it often, but it does do it, and it kind of, if you can tell, it's varnished everything from when the gas evaporates. On top of all of that, the engine, when I noticed the light was coming on, I'd open the back, and the whole engine's shaking. And I know it's running, it's supposed to shake, but it almost seemed like it had like a misfire thing to it. But not quite a misfire, because when I drove it back, it had no power loss or anything. And I don't want to adjust the idle if it's leaking gas, because I think if it's leaking gas, it must be like an O-ring there or a gasket. And if it's a gasket or an O-ring, it might be causing a vacuum leak, which would affect the idle. The other thing that it could be, and it's an old bug, so it might just do that once in a while, these things leak fluid. And the only two fluids in here is the oil and the gas. So, being as close as I am to the oil change that I have to do, this side, and I don't have the parts for it anymore, I threw it out, but your valves are down here, and on these VWs, every time you do an oil change, or every other time, you have to adjust the valves because they're tappets. And so I'm wondering, because this was the first time I've ever done a valve adjustment on a car. Well, no, I've done it one other time, but this is the first time on this car that I've done it. So I went a little on the loose side because I'd rather have it a little loose. This side, the driver's side, has been replaced with a solid shaft. Out, but I haven't done the passenger side, and I haven't switched it over. But basically, these little clip areas right here, they usually have these clips and not washers, spacers. Well, instead of having clips, you've got this blue piece. I guess it could be any color. But this replaces the clips, and then you would just put the spacers and stuff in between, and then your rocker's right on this. So I broke that a while ago, and then they're just like this. I broke that a while ago, and on that side, which is a common problem, so it let go and I burned out spark plugs repeatedly, and it ended up, what had happened is that those on the shaft, the clip at the end had broken off the shaft and all the valves had shifted over. Nothing bad happened to the engine, thank goodness, but this side has been upgraded to the solid shaft. That side has not, and I'm thinking it's either going to be two things, in my opinion. I either got a vacuum leak because of this, because of the leaking, whatever it might be, or the valves are just a little bit off, a little too loose, and it's not opening at the right time. I'm leaning more towards there's a leak in here because, again, if it was a valve issue, I would have lost a decent amount of power, where if anyone has ever had a vacuum leak, it'll idle like crap, but then when you drive it, it's not as obvious that you have a vacuum leak. So I'm thinking it's something to do with the carburetor around this area, and I think it's on the front side. So I'm thinking it's something to do with these shafts. I haven't looked that much into it. It's definitely not where the fuel goes into the carburetor. It's something to do with the pivot points on the carburetor. However, if I'm going to do the oil change, I'm going to go ahead and adjust the valves and see if that solves the problem, because I really don't want to have to mess with the carburetor, because it runs so well where the carburetor is set. And I'm not a huge carburetor adjustment guy. I'm not horrible with it, but I'm not great. I'm sure this one's easy. This is basically a lawnmower engine. It's two lawnmower engines put together. But I don't want to drive it around with a gas leak either, because on this one, and I'm not sure if the design is the same, because on this one, about 2 years ago, and since then we've replaced it. This carburetor, this one specifically, and I will see if I still have photos of the fire, but the fuel line came off and caught the whole side of the thing on fire. I don't want it because, these engines get hot, they're air-cooled engines. This engine is basically the same as the stock one, except this one's obviously got a lot more power and the bore size and all that. But I don't want a gas leak in that bug, because I don't want that to happen to this, what happened to this one to happen to that one. Any longer, I think what I'm going to start with is doing the oil change and making sure that the valves are good, and I think it's got to be 0.06 intake and exhaust. So I'm going to start there and see if that fixes the problem. I'm not going to go mess with the carburetor because it was running great at the current carburetor setting before the last time I drove it, so about a week ago. It was driving just fine, idling just fine, so I really don't want to mess with the carburetor adjustment unless I've made sure that the valves are good and there's no vacuum leak and there's no gas leak, and then I might mess with the carburetor and I could just bump the idle up. I could have bumped the idle up right now and the problem would go away slightly, but I don't want to ignore a problem if there is one. So that's pretty much all this video is about, and I should have a video about me repairing this hopefully this weekend. That's the plan. This weekend I'm going to do the oil change and maybe not convert the shafts over, because that's a really labor intensive job, because I'm going to be doing it on the car. So I'll probably do that in the summer, but at least I'll get the valves and make sure that the valves are within spec, and then see if that fixes it. If that doesn't fix it, then I'll have to dig deeper into the carburetor, because it's either valves or carburetor. We'll see what happens. If you guys have any suggestions, of course, feel free to leave them down in the comments. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Have a nice day.